Hello, this is the voice of Stuart Pearce, and welcome to my series of Deep Dialogues. These are vital conversations I engage in with global soul stewards from all over the planet, providing us with vital understandings about how we can create a new hierarchy of values to help us evolve into a brave new world. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. A brave new world. Well, if we are creating a brave new world, I can say, ladies and gentlemen, we have a remarkable lady before us this evening who is with us this evening. She's before us, but she's also with us in the Blue Ridge Mountains in the United States of America. I know many of you are all over the world. I'm sure there are going to be people pouring in. Joe, we were just joking because Maia is the correct pronunciation, Maia, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. But Maia spent a year living in Ireland, learning, and we can't mention the location, but learning so much from a leading herbalist, which sounds like an amazing lady. So, I'm jumping to the chase. Let me just introduce Maia to you. Good evening, Lisa, Britt, Heather, Gina. It's wonderful to see you all. Lois, well done. Oh, Lois, hello. Maia is an award-winning author of Letting Magic In, The Night School, and the Wild Wisdom series, including the Illustrated Herbiary. Fascinating. I can't wait to buy these books. After pursuing an undergraduate degree at the University of Michigan and a master's at New York University, Maia apprenticed with a traditional healer in Ireland, where she spent an extensive time studying the growing cycles of plants, the alchemy of medicine making, and the psychophysical aspects of holistic healing. Maia maps new pathways for seeing our lives. I'm just going to repeat that. Maia maps new pathways for seeing our lives. There are certain words there that are really imperative. The nature of pathway, the nature of seeing. And she inspires those who encounter her work to live with more purpose, more intention, more magic, and oodles of meaning. Maia is the co-owner of a retail store, Herbiary, with locations in Philadelphia and Asheville, North Carolina, where she lives with her partner and her wonderful dogs. And we will share Maia's website with you later. And welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you
You
so
have
much for having me.
Oh, darling, it's an absolute pleasure. You're a dream. You have a wonderful name. What is the derivation?
You see, if you read Letting Magic In, you'll learn all about my name. I feel like I can't go too far into that without giving away some things that are important to the book. But Maya, spelled Maia, it comes from the Latin for the goddess of springtime, which is not my season. I'm an autumn girl, but Toll was actually my step grandfather's name. And when I first looked it up, I saw that it meant crazy. It was like crazy springtime goddess. I'll do it. Um, but it's a little more subtle than that. I don't speak German, but some people who speak German have told me that it's a little more nuanced than simply crazy. So I was happy to hear that. If there's anyone in the audience who speaks good German, maybe you can tell us about the nuances.
So crazy. Of course, TOLL is also a toll booth, isn't it? So it's about the payment
Yes.
through a segment of land. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Bearing in mind how closely, intimately linked you are with the land. So please tell us about your magic in the form of the new pathways that you seek to allow people to see their lives.
Hmm. When I went to Ireland, we were talking about this before we went live. Um, I was spending a lot of time alone, out of human company. And because of that, I started reaching out to the natural world in ways that we don't normally think to reach out to the natural world. You know, the trees and the birds became my companions. And through that companionship, I began to see that there are ways of viewing our lives that are not human centered, that there are patterns to the world we live in that don't revolve around our um, human civilization and its ups and downs and backwards and forwards. And I think that all of us need that connection with the world around us that is kind of beyond our humanity. Because within our culture, within our civilization, there's a lot of up and down. Within our personal lives, there's a lot of up and down. The natural world is steadier, it's calmer, it's slower, and it lends us a perspective on our own lives, and it gives us a place to go to come back to center that we all desperately need. So I am always working to connect people in to the natural world. And when I say that, people say, "Oh, well, Maya, I live in the city," or um, I live in the suburbs. You live in the woods. I don't live your life." And it's really not about where you live. The natural world is around us all the time. We've just gotten very used to ignoring it. So small things like paying attention to the moon, where it is in its patterns in the sky, paying attention to the time of sunrise and sunset, paying attention to the seasons if you live in a place that has seasons. Right now we're in autumn where I live, and autumn has a rhythm out in the natural world. Everything's releasing. Everything is falling away. The old year is so visibly dying. And so that asks us to turn inward and say, what's dying within us? What do we need to release? What can we let go? What can we learn from watching the trees? So my goal always is to first reconnect myself because I fall out of alignment, you know? Um, And then it's kinda like, put the mask on first, put your own mask on first when you're on the airplane. Like, so first I have to reconnect myself, and then from there, trying to help others to reconnect.
Amazing. And of course, you do this in so many different and, palpable, but also very subtle ways, which is what really the genre of your work is all about. And in every single aspect of your work, there you are generically encouraging us, inspiring us, tripping us up so that we need to fall over into nature, you know, fall over into our paths because so often here we are living up here. I mean, particularly in the United States, America, everything is, I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, everything is, whew, there's so much noise, there's so much cognitive dissonance, there's so much acoustic dissonance. And here you are providing us with a remarkable gift. And so for you to be where you are, because I've just had the privilege, ladies and gentlemen, of seeing where Maya's living, and she's living in a forest, in a beautiful house as you can see. But where she's sitting, she's where we are, so to speak, are trees, are beautiful trees, and the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is just an extraordinary place. And of course, crystalline base, so many crystals in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Wow. Why were you drawn to the Blue Ridge Mountains? How did you fall in love with that landscape? Because originally, am I right, you were from New York City?
I was from Philadelphia, moved to New York City for a bit, and then moved further upstate New York, then to
Yeah.
Ireland. Um, and then when I was studying in Ireland, my teacher would take some time off around the Christmas holidays, and I went to my parents because I no longer had my own place in the States. And I I was bored and I didn't know anyone around there anymore. So I went on Match.com and I met the person I'm now still with. And he was in Philadelphia. And I spent a decade trying to get him out of Philadelphia. Like when I first got there, I didn't feel resonance with the landscape. When I was growing up there, I used to say like I was, I was never coming back, and there I was again. And so in the beginning, I was like, okay, it's kind of like your battle station, Maya. Just be at your battle station. And then after a while, I was like, yeah, I don't care if it's my battle station. I'm abandoning ship. And I sat down with Andrew and said, where do you want to go? And we went to our corners and made a list. And Asheville was actually the only place on both of our lists. And I'd been coming to Asheville, like I think since the 90s, just occasionally for, this or that, a vacation or to visit someone. And I'm really not a mountain person. Like mountains can make me anxious. Um, but there is something about these mountains. They're some say they're the oldest mountains on Earth. Some don't say that. So there's a little debate on that one. But they're very gentle. Like, if you've been in the Rocky Mountains are not gentle. The Rocky Mountains are like a teenage boy.
Yeah.
These mountains are like, your old grandma. And they're also strangely particular. I
Mhm.
have seen these mountains, like people find them very appealing. It feels like a vortex that draws people in, and it spits as many people right back out again as it pulls in. So there's this interesting thing that happens where, people come to Asheville and they love it, but they can't find a place to live. They can't find a job. They can't seem to settle. And then other people get here and just they have a place to live, they have work, they have community. It's a very interesting, like, those of us who live here say it like Asheville chooses its people.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was happening for me that was fascinating was I was living in Philadelphia, which is a reclaimed swamp. So there are areas that are below sea level. And I was having these crazy dreams all the time of rowing a boat to work
Mhm.
or going to a cafe and finding that it had moved 4 blocks inland. And they weren't scary, but they were pretty persistent, like these water dreams. And when we moved here, they just went away.
Mhm.
So I think I was also very aware in that move that um, we're really living in a changing environment, and
Mhm.
I was looking for a place where I could feel safe for like a long time to come.
Mhm.
That I wasn't going to feel like I needed to kind of keep moving. But
Mhm.
interestingly, my partner, his father is British, and he had never claimed his British citizenship. So he's working on that. So who knows? Maybe someday I'll be across the pond.
Mm. Mm. Well, as you know, there's mighty land here, and
Yes.
the ancient island of Albion, very, very, very deep, steeped in the folklore of the Druids. So there's great connection with Ireland. And of course, the heart chakra being Glastonbury. Anyway, I could go on and on and on about this kingdom. One of the reasons why I'm here, because actually my heart is really in the United States, and my work is in the United States. Increasingly so now that I've moved from the entertainment industry that I was involved in for 40 years, and are now really, not exclusively, but inclusively, working through mind, body, and spirit. So I hear you. More into the interpretation of the land. So we know that there are these powerful vortices throughout the United States. Sedona is one, Santa Fe is one, Asheville is one. The leakages from the Blue Ridge Mountains into Asheville. Um, do you know which particular reality are the mountains awakening within people? Can it be, of course, it's highly individualized, I know, but is there a generic form that creates awakening?
It's a really good question. Just the the first thing that came to mind when you asked the question was these mountains create community.
mm,
Um, there's there is a friendliness here that I've
mm,
rarely experienced somewhere else.
mm,
And, I like there are a lot of people flowing in right now to this
mm,
region. And I had some concerns in the beginning that it would start to alter um
mm,
the
mm,
like the feel of the community. But Asheville's kind of amazing. People come in and start behaving like Ashevilleans, and it's little things like if you're pulling out of the supermarket onto a busy road, someone always stops and lets you in, you know. Um, if you're driving down the street and people are walking down the street, they wave to you. It seems like very small things, but when you go to other places where that doesn't happen, you
mm,
realize that these small things really impact your day and how you
mm,
feel about the place where you live and how you feel about the people that you live with. And one of the things that I have felt since moving here is, if we get to end of times, I'm in a good place. Like these are the people I want to do end of times with. Um,
mm,
and I don't think I've ever felt that before. So
mm.
I think that there's something about, the mountains hold you. Things can
Yeah.
only expand so far. Even energetically, things can only expand so far. The mountains are an edge, they're a container, they're a cauldron. Um, and like in much the same way that the energy of Ireland and England has that circular energy because it's an island. We have that energy around the mountains. And you can even see it like throughout the day. I live in what we call a cove, which is Appalachian for, a little valley that's kind of at the end of a mountain range. So it's like not a through valley, but kind of a a peninsula alley, a dead end valley. Um, and so I watch the sunrise on one side and it reflects off the mountains across the way. And then I watch it set on the other and reflect on the other side. And so you're always kind of aware of the container.
Mm,
We often talk in spiritual work about boundaries and the
mm,
importance of boundaries. And
mm,
I found boundaries to also be important in creative work,
mm,
that having a container within which to do your work is super important. And I think that these mountains create a container. And
mm,
then, the community becomes that which is contained.
mm,
And we're like all in the same cook pot, we're all
mm,
swimming in the same water. And
mm,
there is something to that.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Where do you feel it moves you deeply within your body? I mean, what I'm hinting at is what chakra is it involved
Yeah.
with? Because
Um, I'm
mm,
like, my immediate hit is like third.
mhm,
I think that this is a very, very grounded um area. Like this is not upper chakras.
mm, mm,
Yeah, yeah, like
mm,
if I just feel into it, I go right to third.
mm, mm. And if you were to choose a word of virtue to describe the feeling, what would the word be?
Comfort.
Mm, fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think that that's part of why I do really well here. I have a moon in Taurus, so I'm very, very earth-based. My
Mhm,
sun is Gemini, so,
mhm,
you can hear that. But everything else is earth, and so I really need that, like, that solid grounding, that rooted feeling.
mm,
I don't do well in, like, the super upper chakra kind of spaces.
mm,
Um,
mm.
and this feels lower chakra to me. I mean, I'm curious, what do you think? Because I know you're familiar with this area.
Well, very grounded, unbelievably grounded because of the gravitas of the granite, this ancient, ancient rock. And my feeling has always been that there are vast sheets of crystalline energy that I, being an Atlantean, I feel were deposited towards the end times of Atlantis, towards the point of completion, which configures with a lot of the mystical topography identification that, for example, Edgar Cayce moved through. So I feel it's very grounded. But the grace that I've always felt there, I haven't worked in Asheville. I visited friends in Asheville, but I have worked in, I always want to say Charlottesville, but it's actually Charlotte, isn't it?
So Charlotte is in North Carolina, Charlottesville is Virginia, and Charlottesville is very close
Charlotte,
to the Blue Ridge Mountain.
North
Yeah,
Carolina.
Charlotte is not so close to the mountains.
Yeah. And so, well, that's where I was introduced to the idea of the mountains, because of the people who were clients of mine who invited me to run workshops there. I would stay and then we would visit. But the level of communion, which it was something that I felt in Asheville, was one of grace. And so I always felt that although it was very grounded, that it was very much of the heart.
Yeah.
Communion.
Yes.
But not fizzy going up here, as you were saying, which of course,
Right.
as soon as you go to Sedona, you feel as though you're spinning out and suddenly becoming
Right.
extraterrestrial, for example. And I'm sure that Sedona is actually a spaceship probably from the Andromedan nation. I don't think it's actually human at all. It's rather like, for example, going into Northern California, where I used to go regularly before COVID to a retreat center, way, 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 way up. And the first time I arrived, the extraordinary thing was that my books originally were published by Findhorn Community in
Oh, yeah.
Aberdeenshire, famous Findhorn.
Yep.
And I arrived and I said to the director of the project, why is it that I keep seeing, and that we're almost in the Redwoods, why is it that I keep seeing Findhorn everywhere? And he said, well, because actually people from Findhorn, they created the community originally at the beginning of the 20th century, the beginning of the end of the 20th and the beginning of the 21st century. And he said, have you ever met the Redwoods? And I hadn't. So he said, look, we'll just put your luggage into your cabin. You're coming with me, while everybody else just hunkers down and sorts out where they are. So we got into his Jeep and we drove into the Redwoods. Oh my goodness me. Now, they are something else. They are extraterrestrial. Anyway, here we are sharing anecdotal, and I'd love to go deeper into the experience of this. So we're, your thesis, and of course, the name of this particular deep dialogue is letting magic in. And so much of what you've been sharing with us are about finding your own pathways and understanding, even though you were a city girl originally, of understanding the great call of nature, so that you could actually discover a way of really sensing, and it seems seeing your life with greater clarity, and that nature, Mother Nature, the Gaia, has helped with this. Can you take us into the exquisite nature of the tools that you've developed that have produced this wonderful canon of work?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I feel like I just kind of completed um, a chapter in my own life. I've been writing since I was quite young, but um, I remember my father taking me out to lunch after college and saying, "So when are you going to write your book?" And I said, "Well, when I have a story." And so for most of my life, I felt like I was a writer without a story, that I didn't really have any, like, I knew how to string a sentence together, but I didn't have a paragraph and a paragraph and a paragraph that led to a chapter that led to a story arc. And I realized at some point that Ireland was my story, that my time in Ireland, like, this was the story that's only mine to tell. And so in about 2016, I sat down to write that story. And I went to a writing workshop, and I was workshopping my chapters, which is, pretty common for writers. You read out loud to other writers and you see what they think, what they have to say. And what I was noticing was that I had these small excerpts about the plants at the head of each chapter, and people loved them. And they didn't say much about the rest of the chapters. So, I had begun working on this memoir of my time in Ireland, and I realized like, oh wow, this is gonna this is gonna take chops that I don't currently have. But these little tiny excerpts at the top of the chapter, that I can do right now. So those little plant write-ups became my first book, which is called The Illustrated Herbiary. Um, I actually I have because I was had these all out for something else, but I actually have on my desk. Ta-da! So
Very, yeah,
this is for those of you watching. You know how there are some cameras that like you see where things are the way
yeah.
you see them, and then there are some that are backwards. We're working on a backwards camera, so if I'm like, whoa, out of the frame, that's why. Um, so yeah, so the
We can
first
see it absolutely. We can see it fine. Yeah.
so the first book is these short write-ups about the plants.
Mm,
And if you get into non-traditional, well, very traditional, but non what we think of as like Western traditional medicine, um,
mm,
you learn that there are three medicine kingdoms: animal, vegetable, mineral. And this goes across Ayurveda and Taoist medicine and Unani Tib, like, all the ancient medicines pull from
mm,
animal, vegetable, and mineral kingdoms. So after I did the herbiary, I thought, well, let's explore the other two kingdoms. So then I did the bestiary and the crystallary, so that we hit all three medicine kingdoms. Because those are the tools that I use to connect with the natural world. I
mm,
connect through a connection with the plants, through a connection with the animals, and through a connection with stones. And
mm,
it's easy to kind of go to the glitzy stones, the crystals, but for me it really started with the standing stones in Ireland, with these big ancient rocks, um, that really showed me a different perception of time.
mm,
When I was with the stones, when I sat with the stones, I realized that, the time frame that I see as a human is one thing. The time frame that I feel when I work with the trees is something else. And then, like, when you start working with the stones, you get into long time. I mean,
mm,
incredibly long time.
mm,
We are mayflies to the stones.
mm,
And that was just a different layer of perspective,
mhm,
um, and deepening. And then as I begun studying more Taoist medicine and learning, how the stones were used not just as like spiritual medicine, theoretical medicine like we use them today, but as physical medicine, if like this is hematite, right?
mm,
And before you could go take an iron tablet, if you needed iron, hematite was put in water and let soak, and then you drank the water. So you were actually using it on a physical level, on a body level. And that really fascinated me, the way that they've stones have moved now into this esoteric and spiritual space. And it's considered goofy to put some hematite in water, but that's the way people used to get their minerals. And there's just something really interesting to me about that movement from the material physical plane to the esoteric spiritual plane and back again, and how we're using these medicines in different ways at different touchstones in human history.
mm,
um, so these are still my tools, and I cycle through them. Everyone always wants me to tell them what I do every day.
mm,
I don't
mm,
do anything every day.
mm,
Like, I can't tell you anything that, um, I have done every day, day in and day out for years and years and years. I cycle through things, and I think that for me, what's important about that is, um, I'm always trying to tap into the energy of what I need. on a physical level, what I need on a spiritual level, what the world around me needs, what I need to be reminded of,
Mm.
and re-examining. I one of the things that from a very early age I had trouble with was with religion. You said the same prayer over and over again, and it became route, and it had no meaning. You just, it just tripped off your tongue. And if you were in the church, maybe you were saying it in Latin. If you are of Jewish faith, like my family is, then you're saying it in Hebrew, and like you don't even know what the words mean. You just meh, 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 meh. And so, as I started to develop my own spiritual practices, it became very important to me that I was always tapping into the meaning of the words I was using, the meaning of the tool I was using, and flowing through things in a way that allowed them to retain meaning.
Mhm.
Like after something loses meaning for me, I put it aside for a bit. It means it's kind of
Mhm.
become too familiar, and I'm not tapping in the right way anymore.
Mhm.
Um, so, and I circle back. Like this stone has been on my desk for goodness knows how long, and sometimes it's in my pocket, and sometimes it sits on my desk without me noticing it for 6 months, and then it's back in my pocket. Um, and so there's always this re-examination of what do I need today?
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Which is vital in terms of the way that we're relearning, remembering how to be more present, how we can be more present and therefore more prescient. And you were saying some very interesting things, if we can just dwell on the mineral kingdom, the rock kingdom, the crystal kingdom. You were talking about the extraordinary quality of stability that you felt within the standing rocks, the thibbits of standing stones, as they used to be called. And it gave you a sense of chronology. It gave you a sense of the ancient. Could you speak to that perhaps and reveal to us what your sensing of that was and how at this time of immense flux, although we know that the flux is also a mirroring of the ancient nature of Gaia and the ancient nature of cosmology, changing cycle. The point is that we're also in a fever pitch of energy to do with all sorts of um, endings, as we know. And one of the big endings that's taking place is the conflict between the two tribes that has always been at the core of patriarchy. So we have this in the forefront of our consciousness, and most of us are living through it or being influenced by it in a very shocking way, and therefore we're just building up as much stress. I mean, I don't know how many emails I answered today from dear ones writing, saying, "Oh, what do I do? What do I do? Oh, is this the beginning of the end? What on?" Etc. Etc. I don't believe it's the beginning of the end at all. And however, the rocks are telling you something. So, could you speak to us about the revelations that the rocks gave you about their
Yeah.
ancient identity?
So, I think like before I go to the rocks specifically, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of being fearful of endings. I mean,
Yes.
none of us want to be in pain. None of us want to go through a period where like our physical selves are incredibly distressed. And what we're looking at right now, we are seeing this, you know, happening to other humans, and it for any of us who are empathic, it's distressing to us, but it's also scary to us. Like, let's own that we're not just in empathy, we're in fear, right? Like, wow, what is going on, and could this happen to us, to me? So, you know uh, because of the frame up of the larger conflict that's brewing, I want to call that out before I start talking about endings, because in general, I think that our resistance to endings is part of our pain.
Yeah.
That if we are able to say, okay, it's autumn, the leaves are just letting go. They're
Yeah.
letting their energy go back into the roots. They are dropping their leaves. They're dropping their acorns. This is an ending that is
Right.
preparing for a new beginning, right?
Right.
I love I love the Celtic view of the year, that the year ends now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Samhain, which is like today, in today's world, we just say it's Halloween, but
Mhm.
traditionally it's not. Traditionally,
Mhm.
it was when the Pleiades were at their highest point in the sky, which
Yeah.
is later. It's like now with the way the stars have moved and stuff, it's closer to like I think November 20th or 21st.
Mhm.
Um, but this time of year, this window where one year is closing and the new year is beginning. We're moving into the womb of the new year.
Mhm.
And I think that if we can allow ourselves to get comfortable with that
Mhm.
and let ourselves go through our endings as a practice, right?
Mhm.
If like we get to use the cycle of the seasons as a practice run. Oh,
Mhm.
this is how you do endings gracefully. This
Mhm.
is how you step in on purpose and say, okay, it's autumn. What do I need to release? What do I need to let go? I've been running a program called Witch Camp for a number of years, and I didn't feel like doing a whole big online program this year, but I'm on my Substack. I'm just doing a little mini witch camp. And this is exactly what we're working with. We're just talking about like, how do you let go? How do you release? And how do you interrogate your life and
Mhm.
find out what needs to be let go
Mhm.
and why it might, like, why its energy might linger.
Mhm.
What is it that wants to stay? What is it that needs to go? Why are you holding on to something? Um, Oftentimes what I find is when energies linger, whether it's the energy of an argument you had with someone last week, or the energy of a partner from 10 years ago who you're no longer with, the energy of an old home, the energy of a person who has passed. When energies linger, it's usually because we have not given them the time, love, and attention that they need. And so I love in this time of year to practice ending things well. And
Mhm.
so when things come up that need to be released, I try to give them the time and energy and love that they need to see what focus needs to be put on that energy so that I can unclasp my hands and let go.
Mhm. Mhm.
And right. So, you know, I I think that if we can find ways to reframe endings for ourselves and
Okay.
practice moving
So
through them,
can you, in your experience, can you
yeah,
name what you feel is the emotion that stops us from letting go?
for me, I think it's when I have unfinished business.
Mhm.
So, emotional work that I haven't completed,
Mhm.
um, energetic work that I haven't completed,
Mhm.
when it's an other energy, like a
Mhm.
ghost energy,
Mhm.
um, what is like what are the component pieces between me and that energy
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
need to be completed, right?
So
I
it's
think it's easy to kind of go big picture and be like, well, what does that energy need from the world? You can only take care of you and that energy.
about you in relationship to you. So the way that I follow this intuitively is that you're encouraging and honoring the nature of excavation, that we go deep into the emotional autopsy of what this remembering, this linking in is all about, that is evidently very deep within our consciousness. It's not on surface level. You see, for me, the thing that's coming up for so many people at this time is a genuine need to meet the specter of loss
Hmm.
within the neuroses of separation.
So say more. So the specter of loss,
The
you know,
specter of that we're finding completions or endings challenging because of the nature of loss, which comes up in relation to the horror that's going on in the Holy Land. And of course, I'm spending a lot of time in prayer, in stillness, and also actioning whatever I can with people that I know there, and engaging in online meditations. Don't forget, everybody, there'll be another one on the 11th of the 11th, which I'll make sure that I put a meme up about this on my Facebook page after this deep dialogue with Maia. So the spectre of loss seems to be there aplenty. Now, we know that within that, it's simply to do with the fact that we're fearful of letting go. We're fearful of change. Because we don't really know who we are, because we're not allowing ourselves to be within the incandescence of our spirit and noticing how warmly held we are by Divine Mother, by the Gaia. So I feel and we're being given this wonderful opportunity, which is why the horror of this sectarian conflict is so emergent such an emergency in our consciousness, because we all know the horror could lead towards the inevitable Third World War, which will be disastrous. I don't believe it will get there. I believe that there will be unseen and seen aid that will bring about a miraculous form of recovery. But it's giving us an opportunity, I believe, to stop watching our TV screens. I mean, metaphorically speaking, as well as literally, getting news from rather more passive, because we know that many of the broadcasts are shot full with a dynamic of energy that is purely vibrational, which is about controlling us in fear. And then recognizing that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. So here we are, as initiates, we are awakened to this. And so that if we can connect with the fourth dimension, I'm not saying we ostrich ourselves in 3D, but if we connect with the fourth dimension and draw fifth dimensional and fourth dimensional energy into our bodies, we know that there is no loss, there is only finding, that there is no trauma, that there is no scarcity, that there is no hatred, there is no anger, and there is no violence. And as a result of that, we really serve the critical function of what's taking place on our planet, because we're sending in loving balm and healing energies. And this is what Buddha and Jesus were teaching. I mean, all the principal teachers, all the great prophets were teaching it. They called it the kingdom of heaven. And of course, it is within us. And so the more that we move deep within our hearts to extol the virtue of what this means, that we have grace, that we have mercy, that we have kindness, that we have unconditional love, that we have care, etc., 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 we have empathy, compassion for all that's going on, then endings are really gentle. And this is a being who had vast separation anxiety as a child, because people were coming and going. My sun is in Taurus and my moon is in Gemini. So you have
We're
experience.
opposites. Yeah.
So I've shifted around from your configuration.
What's really interesting, and like I'm going to say some things that are just coming up for me as I'm listening to you speak. So
Yeah.
please, this is not thought out. This is kind of like something's perking and I'm curious about it. So I might get this wrong is what I'm kind of saying before I even spit it out. But you know, when I'm thinking about um, the vibrational energy and keeping an eye on the vibrational energy of our being and what the great teachers told us about that. Um, and then I think of the fighters on one side of this conflict who are going willingly into death because it's a way to reach,
Mm, mm,
um, a rewarded heavenly state. And when I start to think about like what there is some convolution in the spiritual lesson
yes.
that you know I think is part part of what allows us to step into the physical conflict. Um, and I don't know what we do about that. You know what I mean? Like I don't know how we how we address that, or if the best way to address something like that is to just sit in our own center and
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and radiate something else. But it
Well,
is
that's what I'm talking about.
I'm going to be thinking about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about, is really drawing in divine source, of drawing in divine elixir in a really grounded state. I'm not talking about leaving our bodies. I'm talking about being right here and right now. At the core of my work is groundedness and weight. If the actor doesn't have weight, because at the core of great acting is a truth of feeling statement, then they become mawkish and people stop listening. It just goes, everything, it just goes up here. It just becomes chaotic and confusing. But if they're really, really grounded in their bodies, then we feel these deep pulsations of emotionality that bring us into that magnetic draw that we call empathy, what I call the magnetic voice, which is my field of specialism. So what I'm talking about, you see, unfortunately, the specter of conflict and of trauma that is within many of the terrorist bodies means that they've actually idealized, that they've ideologically created this notion through Islam that they will be greeted in heaven by Muhammad and he will say, well done for jihad. What they're not realizing is that they're going to be carrying with them the weight of karma for the dissolution and the destruction of so much life, animal, vegetable, and mineral. Anyway, so there's a big subject, and let's return to it. I want to bring us back to the earth because I know, for example, one of the things that cured my specter of loss or my feeling of not being able to complete and not being in reverence to nature as you are, as you watch the trees falling. I was only thinking today as I engaged in nature, which I do, although I live right in the center of London, I always touch nature. Literally, I breathe her in and walk past by her. Trees are immensely important for me. And so as I saw these leaves falling, I suddenly remembered my mother, a moment when I was about 6 years of age, and she was a country lass. So whenever she could, we moved from the country, from the town, from London back to the country. And she taught me about listening to the trees and listening to the leaves and how they would sing a song. And I suddenly saw, the peace of what this is actually all about. So we come back to the nature of the fact that one of the great lessons that I had was living with the Bedouin in the Sinai and not being able to speak Arabic, but living with them as having my own camel. I lived with them for 2.5 months, and watched the way that they would, because they were nomadic. It got to a point where the wind would change, and everybody knew. Interesting that they should bark at
Dolls.
the moment. That as the wind changed, as a grain of sand fell in another direction, everybody knew whether it was in the afternoon or in the middle of the night. You would wake, everybody knew, and everybody set about their tasks, which were all ritualized. Because as we set about our tasks of, for example, packing up the contents of the tents, they went on boxes onto the camels, and then the rugs were rolled up, they went onto the camels, and then the tents came down, they went onto the camels, and we were off. And everybody was in this concerted effort. And I noticed that everybody was praying. Everybody was saying, thank you to Allah, may his name be praised, for the rich abundance and safety that we'd had. And now it was time to go. So there was an honoring of ritual. There was never a feeling of loss. And when we arrived, the same thing would happen, but in reverse. And the first thing that would happen is that we'd all go into the big tent, and Papa, because this was a 16 individualized family, Papa would say prayers to say thank you for safe passage. And the way that they read the sand, or the wind would change, or if at night, because we traveled a lot at night because it was so hot during the day in the desert, and they would watch the stars or the moon. So it's going back to what you were saying at the beginning about revering the cycles of nature, revering the sun and solar cycles, and the way that we in this temperate zone that we live in, we have 4 seasons, whereas we know that when we go into the tropics, there are 6 seasons. And so, how we can honor those seasons, as a result of that, we're taught to extubate extubate loss, and love takes its place. I hadn't
Yeah.
intended that to happen, but that's. Tell us what you mean by, if you are patient, point by point, connection by connection, the journey emerges.
Mm. So in Letting Magic In, which is my most recent book, um, I use the metaphor of a spider web. And spiders spin their web in a really interesting way. They start by just, moving a horizontal line, like from tree to tree or from point to point. And then they go to the middle of that point and they drop a line down so that they get like a 3 point um, stable structure to then weave upon. And when you're first looking at that, you know, T tripod, it doesn't look like much, right? It's just string art. And yet that structure becomes the web. And I think our spiritual journeys are much the same. We drop an anchor, we drop another anchor. It doesn't look like much. We don't understand where we are. We're still not we're still not stable. We're still not seeing the pattern. And so as we move through our levels of learning, our levels of connecting, our levels of uh, understanding ourselves, we're plotting points. And it takes time, it takes patience to begin to see what that looks like.
Mm,
As I was working on the book, a friend of mine pointed out that I was working kind of like a spider. I was dropping plot points
yeah,
and that it was taking time for the reader to be able to go, oh, I see the pattern.
yeah.
Because as someone who's done this work for many years and taught for many years within this, I think it's really important to let people come to the pattern themselves. If I give you the pattern, it doesn't really mean very much. But if I give you the plot points and let you then work out the pattern for yourself, then you come to something that's resonant with you. So that's what I was referring to with that sentence was, this idea that especially that was at the very beginning of the book. And I really wanted people to start to feel how the book was going to unfold, which was in this very point by point way. And you might not get it at first. You might be a little like, wait, why is she telling that particular story? But give it a minute because all these points will start to spiral together as we drop them, onto the web.
Amazing. And what is patience for you?
Hmm. I think patience, like most things, means different things on different days. On a day that I have sat with the stones, patience is decades. On a day that I am very much in my human skin and staring at the clock, even as I'm doing a podcast or whatever, patience is seconds. And I think the work is always to stretch it back out, like to stretch back out into earth time, to stretch back out into stone time. And when I noticed I was doing a podcast a couple days ago, and I noticed that I was like just fidgeting with my ring the whole time, like under the desks, fidgeting, fidgeting, fidgeting. And I was like, okay, you know, this is not a centered, grounded experience right now. I mean, think about that word grounded, right? And so moving back into tree time, rock time, earth time, right? Stretching and stretching and stretching and allowing um, my human skin to become porous until patience doesn't even mean anything anymore. Like when you're in the time that those standing stones are in, the word patience has no meaning. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
ongoing, right? It's ongoing work. I feel like you do this work and then you get to a place and you're like, ah, and then you lose it. And you do the work again. And so
Yes.
it's a constant retethering yourself
Mm.
to yourself and to the earth over and over and over again.
This is how it used to be with me, and of course, one of the great things that I've learned through, for example, stories like the one that I've just told about being with the Bedouin, is the flow of life and the extraordinary nature of change. That nothing is permanent; everything is constantly in a wonderful wave-like form. But now I notice that there are still points, and the still points are more within than without, although sometimes there's a harmonization with cycles of nature or with lodestones. My relationships, my intimate relationships, are very significant to me, and there are certain people in my life that are ciphers by which a certain reality can be read within the context of my own archetypal nature. And those sorts of still points, or coming to the favored maxims in my life, the extraordinary aha moments that have come, those eureka moments, and they become portals into the infinitesimal nature of the cosmos. But they're also very grounded in my humanness. I feel that this is what happens through nature, because I'm beginning my seventh decade, and so I'm seeing through the chronology of life. So this is the sort of quality of wisdom. And of course, I berate myself because I knew that I had a certain wisdom as a child, but I wish I had the wisdom that I now have when I was a child. It would have made life much easier. Not that I get caught up in, self-recrimination or regret or self-pity or any of that. I just don't allow that. These were the sensations that I needed from the sacred, is also a beautiful quote on your website. I love, just for the remaining moments or two, this has been such a rich conversation. I'd love you to speak to, I mean, you've already really given us clear ideas about, particularly with the ancient nature of rock. Um, these were the sensations I needed from the sacred. Such an extraordinarily haunting line. Because before, there's a supposition that before you received them, you didn't know what you wanted. But as soon as you received them, there was a moment that was very hallowed, that was very sacred.
Yeah. So um, that line is from a chapter in the book where my grandmother has just passed away, and my mother and I were trying to figure out, like, what do you do when someone dies? Like, what is the process that you go through physically and emotionally and spiritually? And we found ourselves a bit at a loss. And my aunt Gloria swooped in, and she embodied the Jewish faith. I came from a secular family that, was involved in Jewish culture, but not in Jewish religion. And it was fascinating to watch her moving through and to see she knew what to do when someone died, right? Her faith told her what to do in these instances. And so I was watching um, her move through this very specific dance and still not feeling connected, still trying to find that sense of the sacred in it, and seeing that it was sacred to her. Like, it was very obvious to me that she was in sacred space and I was sharing space with her, but I was not in sacred space. And so I went outside, and the cicadas were singing, and I sat outside and I looked at the stars and I listened to the chorus of the night and thought, this is what I need from the sacred.
Mm,
This.
beautiful. Beautiful. This has been such a wonderful conversation, such a lovely dialogue. Thank you so much. We've gone into some of the deep permeations of what our lives are all about in this moment, or these moments, and also within the ancient nature of our wisdom. So I really want to thank you from the core of my being for this great deep dialogue. And
Thank
hopefully
you
you will
so
return
much.
so that we can hear more about the development of the. And ladies and gentlemen, forgive me, I have been very aware of you typing away in the comment box. I was about, which I normally do, as you well know, those of you who know me, I was about to say, are there any questions? But it's very interesting that we were speaking on such a multi-layered quality of experience that I wanted to keep just honing us in relation to the real gems that Maya's shared with us. So forgive me for not asking questions, but we'll have her back and then you can ask loads and loads and loads of questions. So we will need to close. So Maya, thank you so much. So bless you. And for those of you who've been with us, namaste, namaste, namaste. And don't forget that this time next week, there will be another remarkable lady. This is a season of 12 female global soul stewards, and you're number 7. So we have 5 more ladies to go, and wonderful caravanserai of different energies. So I bless you for adding to this remarkable constellation of female soul stewards. It's been absolutely wonderful. So namaste,
I'm glad to
everybody.
be number 7.
Yeah, exactly. And please, can you just stay where you are? Because I'd love to just chat with you. Bye, everybody. Namaste. Thank you, Ryan.